What is up, Packers Nation? Happy Wednesday. Happy schedule release day. Welcome into an all-new episode of the Pack-A-Day Podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. You can find the podcast at Pack-A-Day Podcast. Thanks, as always, for being here. It is a unique day on the Packers calendar, on the NFL calendar. We actually get the full Packers schedule today. There's aspects of this that I love. There's aspects that I think are sort of ridiculous. There's aspects that I'm a little bit just sort of kind of over with. Like, that's going to sound curmudgeon-y, but I'm kind of past and over, I think, to some extent, the schedule release videos. Like, I think they're overdone, meaning like the little ones that all 32 teams do to some extent. And I thought the Packers did a great job last year. We got I Think You Should Leave and crew, which is pretty good. We've got, some of the ones, what was it, the Tennessee Titans, where they interview fans, and they do the ones where it's, they say the name of the team that they think it is, and it's wrong, which are hilarious. And then the Chargers are always A+. I'm not, this is going to sound like I care about it. I really don't, one way or the other. It's totally fine. Some of them are funny. Just think maybe something different this year, something new. I don't know. Like I said, I'm probably just being curmudgeon-y on this one. That's fine. Whatever. I also, like I said, like, this is one of those things I know, like, a lot of people get really fired up about. And like I kind of talked about with Josh, it's like, all right, cool. We already knew the opponents, and most of us, right, are, especially people who are watching a 365-day year Packers podcast, are probably know we're going to be watching all the games anyway, right? So I know all the games I'm going to be watching. I know which teams are going to be playing. So it's just sort of an order of operations thing. But that being said, put that aside, it is still a really cool day on the calendar in general, because we actually have a full schedule, when the bye week is, when are they playing on Monday Night Football, Sunday Night Football. Yes, some of that stuff can get flexed. We get it, but it does still feel a little bit more real, a little bit more tangible when we actually can sink our teeth into an actual schedule. So we get that today. I'm looking forward to it. I'm sure there's going to be leaks throughout the course of the day. We have 2 games announced already. Week 10, Packers versus Eagles on Monday Night Football. Week 16, Packers at Bears on Saturday. We don't know exactly the time of that one yet, but a Saturday game against the Bears in Chicago, again, week 16. So only 2 games that have sort of been leaked, spoiled. In this case, these have been actual NFL leaks, not any sort of rumors or anything like that, but only 2 games so far. I'm sure as the course of Wednesday goes along, we'll get more and more. And then by 7 p.m. when it's released, we'll probably know just about all of it by that time anyway. But enjoy your schedule release day, regardless of how you want to celebrate, whether it's you don't care whatsoever, or you enjoy every aspect from the actual release itself to all the videos and everything. You be you, and just enjoy it. And again, we actually have something to sink our teeth into. By the way, regardless of where you end up on that spectrum, I am going to be doing a couple live shows. So as soon as it's released, 7 o'clock p.m., I will be on the Bleacher Report app live for 30 minutes, just kind of breaking everything down. Then probably about 8 o'clock Central Time, I will go live on YouTube as well. Just do kind of a live Q&A talking about the Packers schedule and kind of going over anything that anyone wants to go over. But we'll probably talk a little bit about the schedule. Well, I know we're going to talk about the schedule as well. So 8 p.m. Central Time on Wednesday, live right here on the YouTube channel. Pack-A-Day will be going over that in greater detail. And then, of course, members Q&A is going to be Thursday, and happy hour will be Friday. So keep an eye out for those as well. Speaking about that members Q&A, if you've not signed up yet to be a Pack-A-Day Podcast YouTube member, make sure to do so. Shout out to Ben Reagan and Zilcherson for becoming all new Pack-A-Day Podcast YouTube members. Appreciate you guys a ton. Like I said, still plenty of time to sign up to get involved in those weekly Q&As as well. We got some news and notes to get to before we get to our main topic for today, which is going to be Packers to keep an eye on this offseason, which is an interesting and intriguing topic that I'm excited to go over today. But before we get there, I guess just really one thing. Per Jason Wilde, Elton Jenkins, the reason that he has not been at voluntary team activities is because he wants the Packers to rework his contract. This is an interesting one. Elton Jenkins, by pretty much any measure, is being paid as the top, or at least one of the top interior offensive linemen in all of football. Regardless if you want to look at it at center or guard, he's right there. So it's really sort of difficult for this season, I should say. So it's really sort of difficult to look at, Elton and say like, hey, we should be paying you more, because he's right near the top of what, anyone as an interior offensive lineman should be making. Now, from Elton's point of view, he's probably looking at it a whole heck of a lot more from a 2026 standpoint. And when you start looking at 2026 and his contract, the Packers have the ability right now to get out of it basically completely. So you look at next year, 24.8 million is what he's set to make, but only 4.8 of it is going to count towards dead salary. They can get out of 20 million of that contract and just move on. And basically, how you're kind of looking at it from Elton's point of view is that this is it. This is like a 1 year deal. And then the Packers have what you would consider a team option next year. Now, if I'm Elton, and if I'm just kind of being blunt here, this is a bad contract for Elton at this stage of his career. Meaning the 2026 contract is all but in a real way, sort of just fake. And if you're a NFL agent and if you're a player, you don't really want these sort of scenarios where Green Bay holds all the power going into 2026. Yes, there's 4.8 million in signing bonus. That only matters from a salary cap and accounting standpoint. Elton's already been paid that money in signing bonus up front. So Elton's got an additional $20 million next year that he can make on a 1 year deal in 2026. Zero of it is guaranteed, meaning Green Bay has a legitimate 1 year team option. If Elton plays great this year and legitimately is a all-pro center like Brian Gutekunst said he thought he could be, well, then you get to sign or bring him back on a 1 year, $20 million deal, and it's probably worth it. If it's anything less than that, the Packers can simply say, see ya. Whether that's trying to trade him, like not that we need another, should they trade him, could they trade him saga next offseason, but that's another one that they could do. Or if, again, they can't find a trade partner, they could release Elton Jenkins and save the full $20 million. So all the power in 2026 is in Green Bay's hand, and none of it is in Elton Jenkins' hands. And I'm sure that is probably the bigger aspect of this. That's a problem. I don't think Elton's in a bad, state of mind contractually for this upcoming season. And his cap number is 17.6. Now you can argue maybe if you take the signing bonus that's already there, maybe the base salary is a little bit less than what, certainly maybe some other players are getting. So you could probably make a little bit more of an argument there. But if I had to guess, I would say 2026 is probably a little bit more of the sticking point there. Whether or not they can work something out, that is a bigger question. I don't necessarily know that you want to have your, great interior offensive lineman that's moving over to center be sort of disgruntled and unhappy going into the season and missing any time. You want him working with Jordan as much as possible and making that transition to center and having as much practice time as he possibly can. You don't really want him missing OTAs and mini camps and then being sort of a quote unquote hold-in where, he's going to come to camp so he doesn't get fined, but my hamstring's just bothering me just a little bit. Don't think I can practice today, or my back. I have a bad back today, not going to be able to practice. And everyone knows it's just a hold-in at that point where he's there, can't find him, but he's not actually going to practice. That's not what you want either. So hopefully we get some sort of resolution on this sooner rather than later. We'll, of course, keep you posted as we kind of get into everything and if we get any updates on Elton. But that's kind of one to kind of keep an eye on over the course of, let's say, the next few weeks, just to see if there's anything here. Does he report to OTAs and mini camps? Does he go into training camp? Like, all those things are going to be interesting. Like I said, hopefully it gets resolved well before then. That brings us to our main topic for today, and that is Packers to keep an eye on this offseason. And it's a simple topic, right? It's pretty straightforward. Which Packers are you're going to want to keep an extra eye on as we go through basically OTAs and mini camps to training camp, family night, preseason, and as we get set for the regular season. And a lot of seasons I'll do this episode, and it's sort of like looking through and be like, all right, here's a handful of guys to keep an extra eye on. And it's a rookie or a free agent and maybe a guy that needs to bounce back. We did our bounce back episode the other day. And this one, what we're going to talk about today, there's no here's the 10 guys you should keep an eye on in 2025. It's not like that at all. There's so many freaking players that are really worth keeping an eye on this offseason. So I thought the easiest way to do this is kind of go position by position. And even then, I had to sort of narrow it down as best that I possibly could. Whether it is players that need to bounce back, like we've talked about, some really exciting rookies in some very unique roles, whether it's free agents that Green Bay brought in, whether it's guys that are in sort of now or never seasons, whether it's drama, Jane Reed, Elton Jenkins, Jair Alexander, whether it is players coming back from injury, Jordan Love, amongst other. Like, there is so much intrigue all throughout this team. And I think most of it's good intrigue. Like, there should be some players bouncing back, some players coming back from injury, some players that are expected to break out, some players that they did get via free agency or the draft that we're really excited about. So I think there's plenty to talk about here, and I think there's plenty to be excited about, but there is no lack of storylines and intriguing topics and intriguing players to keep an eye on this offseason. So let's go through it right away. Let's start at quarterback, as we usually do. This one's simple. It's straightforward. It's obvious. We don't need to dig into it anymore. It's Taylor Elgersma. No, I'm just kidding. This is Jordan Love. Yes, the Elgersma story is fun. Is there anything with Sean Clifford, Malik Willis in year 2 with the system, and so on and so forth? Sure. Awesome, great, wonderful, grand. Jordan Love is the story here. He's the one to watch. And I think the reason here being is that we still don't quite know who the real Jordan Love is. I've talked about this a lot. First of all, 3 redshirt seasons, basically. When he got in that 3rd year, finally, again in that Philadelphia game, looked pretty good. Got a little glimpse there, a little glimmer. Then beginning of 2022 is when he had that glimmer against Philadelphia. 2023, he first half of the season looks just first year starter. Not bad by any means, but not exactly special. Just kind of like all right, we established, I felt like we really established in those first 7-8 games of like, all right, he's clearly a starting quarterback. Let me be clear. That was not a guarantee going into that season. Like, it was assumed, it was thought, it was believed he was going to be a legitimate starting quarterback. There was no guarantee of that. There was a world in which Jordan started 2023 and it just did not go well at all. And you ended up in like a Daniel Jones sort of situation, whatever it might be, where it's just like, oh, yeah, this is just not going to work. But early on, we established that he is a starter. Like, he's clearly one of the top 32 quarterbacks in the league. Just didn't have still a feel of where he was. Then you get to the second half of 2023 and it's like, oh yeah, they did it again. Like, he's that freaking good. Green Bay found another stud quarterback. And going into 2024, you felt that way of like, holy crap, this they did it again. This is the 3rd one in a row. Jordan Love is him. They got him. They did it. They now have another stud quarterback. And then you get to the Philly game and he has the MCL injury and an immediate thought of like, oh my God, he's out for the year. And thankfully he was not, but he's very clearly hurt in a major way. I wouldn't say he necessarily came back too early because he was able to play. And listen, as an NFL quarterback, as a starter, as the leader of the team, you got to play through some injuries. That's sort of part of the job description. But he clearly was not himself when he came back. Still in the second half of that Minnesota game, did some ridiculous things. I was turning the ball over a little bit too much, did not have his mobility, had to kind of change the offense a little bit. And the biggest thing was missed so much practice time. As he was starting to get back, then he's got the groin injury, and he's starting to get back, then he's got the thumb injury. And it just felt like we never really saw Jordan Love. So you had sort of I would say like a floor setter at the beginning of 2023, where it's like, all right, he's a starting quarterback. Then you had a breakout end of 2023, and then just a total unknown 2024 due to all the injuries. So who is he in 2025? Are some of those consistencies that reared their ugly heads in 2024 just due to the injuries, or were those real concerns? Was the end of 2023 and that second half of that year, was that the real Jordan Love, or was that a fluke? Or is there something even above and beyond what we saw at the end of 2023? I think all those things are in play. I legitimately do. I think it's going to be closer to end of 2023. I think there's a fantastic quarterback there, but he's going to have to show the consistency. He's going to have to find that balance between being that gunslinger and taking care of the ball and making sure that he's not making big mistakes. Because Jordan is at his best when he's wheeling and dealing and just freestyling and letting the ball rip. Good things normally happen when that's the Jordan that we see. But we also have seen some turnovers when playing that way. But when he got too risk averse in the second half of last year, you didn't see some of those superpowers come to fruition either. So Jordan hopefully being healthy all offseason. Remember, he missed the beginning of the installs in training camp last year because he was out with a contract dispute. So just there's a lot of missed practice time for Jordan. with contract stuff and then with injuries in 2024. If he can just practice in 2025 and be healthy in 2025, I find it almost impossible that we're not going to see a much better, much improved Jordan Love in 2025. But he is very clearly the player that you want to keep an eye on. At quarterback, goes without saying, pretty simple, pretty self-explanatory, but nonetheless, he's the one. Running back is Marshawn Lloyd to me. We know Josh Jacobs. I'm intrigued to see if Emmanuel Wilson, Chris Brooks can take a step, if any of these undrafted free agents are anything to write home about. But the main running back we need to talk about is Marshawn Lloyd. And I talked about it before. I'll talk about it again. Marshawn Lloyd at times in training camp last year looked like the best running back in camp. That is Josh Jacobs included. And I think Josh Jacobs is probably ramping up. He's a veteran. He knows how to get through a training camp and a preseason to get ready for the actual regular season itself when the rigors of the actual season sort of take place. But I digress. Marshawn Lloyd looked fantastic last year in camp, and he looked like he was going to be a big-time player. And Matt LaFleur has talked about him as somebody that they expected to be within the game plan last year, somebody that had that playmaking ability. And then even this year, when, prior to drafting Golden and Savion Williams, when Matt LaFleur was sort of asked about, who can help really pick up the slack for an injured Christian Watson from a playmaking standpoint, he brought up Marshawn Lloyd sort of unprompted, and him being somebody that can really probably be a playmaker within this offense. I am so intrigued by him. This could be one of those players that just struggles with injuries. It could be a player that just never quite lives up to the hype, or he could be everything as advertised. And remember, he was Daniel Jeremiah's best running back in the draft class for 2024. I really liked him from what I saw in college. I really liked him from what I saw in training camp. I think there's a big time running back here. I really do. A couple things that he's really going to have to figure out. Remember, in college, he had a big time fumbling issue. So that was a worry and a concern going into last year. We don't know if that's going to be a problem in the NFL because he didn't get really any carries because of all the injuries. And then the other thing is pass pro. That's going to be his way to get on the field, is by showing he can protect the quarterback when needed. That's going to be something he has to continue to work on. But I am massively intrigued as to what Marshawn Lloyd can bring to this offense and how he can be somebody that potentially is a game breaker and playmaker in the running game, and is really a sort of different flavor than what Josh Jacobs brings to the table. So for me, unquestionably, running back is Marshawn Lloyd. Wide receiver. This one's pretty easy. It's the entire damn wide receiver room. I am just beyond intrigued as to what's going to happen at wide receiver. Now, part of the way, I just feel like it's probably going to be Dobbs and Wicks and Reed and Golden as your top four. Watson will work his way back from injury. Savion Williams will get himself in a package or two here or there, and they'll try to get him involved and get him some touches. But it's probably just going to be a top four that's very similar to last year, except Golden instead of Christian Watson. That probably is what ends up happening. Even within that, right? How does Romeo Dobbs look this year going into a contract year? Is there an extra motivation there? Or is he just a little bit, still frustrated with his situation? And could there be more issues with Romeo Dobbs like we saw when he was suspended last year? I don't expect that to be the case. There's also still the question of hey, if Golden and Savion Williams look great and everyone else is looking good, is there still a world in which they could potentially trade Romeo Dobbs? I don't think so, but it's not out of the complete question either. When does Christian Watson come back? That's a big one. That's not an off-season question, but that's going to be an in-season question. Dontavian Wicks. Which Dontavian Wicks shows up? Heck, just the 2023 version would be huge, but I think we were all expecting something better than the 2023 version in 2024. That never happened. We got a worse version, one that just could not catch the ball for the first half of the season. And then finally, he sort of settled in the second half. Which version of Wicks do we get? Reed was the opposite. He started gangbusters, and the second half hit a wall, didn't do anything. We now have some Jaden Reed drama as well. What do Matthew Golden and Savion Williams bring to the table? And then do McCole Hardman, Malik Heath, and Bo Melton get themselves in the number 6 wide receiver conversation, or do they just let all of them go, hoping they can get a couple of them back on the practice squad? This whole room is just reeking of intrigue in a good way. I think mostly a good way. You could tell me again, this could go in so many different directions with so many of these different wide receivers of how the wide receiver room is made up, and I would probably believe you. I think Matthew Golden has the ability to be a stud. I think Savion Williams is going to be able to contribute sooner rather than later. I think Dobbs is going to want to get fed. I think Wicks is still going to have a very large argument to be in the lineup and catching passes from Jordan Love. Jaden Reed's going to have a major role. Christian Watson's coming back at some point. I am so intrigued to see not only how this wide receiver room shakes out, which players make the team, which ones don't, how that pecking order comes to, fruition, and then also just who goes out and plays great this year, because there's a lot of talent and Green Bay is in need of not maybe a true number one, but a couple of these guys just really going out and performing at the level of the expectation that is set for them. I think Jaden Reed certainly can. I think Matthew Golden certainly can. I'm just very intrigued to see how it plays out. So wide receiver is a mystery box, and I think a lot of good ways, but there's some certainly intriguing ones as well. But the entire receiving room is one really to kind of keep an eye on. At least the first 9 guys, like the guys that have a legitimate chance to make the roster, I'm going to be watching all of them very, very closely to see how they perform this offseason. Tight end is pretty simple in the fact that it's just Luke Musgrave. Now, I do want to see if Tucker Kraft can take a jump. I'm interested a little bit in that number 3 battle between probably Ben Sims and Fitzpatrick. Maybe Messiah Swinson could get his name in that conversation as well. But to me, this is very much about Luke Musgrave. Now, the other day, when asked about play action, Adam Stenovich brought up Luke Musgrave in the 12th personnel package as a way to sort of jumpstart that play action game. And I think that's probably true. I think that can be one way to get there. I just want to see a more dynamic, more sort of complete tight end in Luke Musgrave. 2nd round pick, all the talent in the world. Struggled with injuries at Oregon State. Struggled with injuries his first 2 years in the NFL. Certainly a level of toughness there that we've heard about over and over. Wants to be on the field. Saw a little bit more dynamic play in 2023, but he had sort of the stumbling issues. In 2024, didn't do much of anything. 7 catches and didn't really do anything with those 7 catches. This is a big year for Luke Musgrave. In year 3, can he be somebody that is counted upon in this offense? Can he improve his blocking just a little bit? Can he be that guy that's getting up the seam? Can he be helpful in play action? Can he be helpful in the red zone? Like I said, this is a huge offseason for Luke Musgrave. I really think there's a super talented player there. But as I've said all offseason, the idea of Luke Musgrave has been better than Luke Musgrave so far. I want to see Luke Musgrave match the idea that we have in our minds of what Luke Musgrave can be. Offensive line, the left tackle and right guard positions are really what's going to be most intriguing to me. The Elton Jenkins situation that we just talked about and just how he transitions to center, that's a piece of it as well. There's a part of me that's interested in the entire Jacob Monk situation of him falling out of favor and not being active for a huge chunk of the end of last year. Is he still in the plans? Does he make the team? But this is really about left tackle. In that case, Rasheed Walker, Anthony Belton, Jordan Morgan, and right guard, Sean Ryan, Anthony Belton, and Jordan Morgan. Who starts where? And is there any sort of rotation that goes along with it? Or does anyone just grab one of these positions and say, that's mine? If you told me Rasheed Walker or Anthony Belton or Jordan Morgan started at left tackle, I would believe it. If you told me Sean Ryan or Anthony Belton or Jordan Morgan started at right guard, I would believe it. I'm still going to say that Jordan Morgan and Rasheed Walker rotate at left tackle to start the season, and Anthony Belton and Sean Ryan rotate at right guard. I feel more confident about Morgan rotating somewhere. Belton as a rookie is going to have to probably prove it a little bit more. But I think at some point, they probably want to prepare for Jordan Morgan, Aaron Banks, Elton Jenkins, assuming he's back next year, and then, probably Anthony Belton and Zach Tom in 2026. I think that's probably what you want to prepare for. So getting Belton and Morgan reps this year, I think is going to be important. And that's why I think you're going to see some sort of rotation. But even regardless of the rotation, things like that, who steps up, who plays well? Aaron Banks at left guard is another intriguing one to keep an eye on because he's new to the team. But I'm going to really be keeping a close eye on left tackle and right guard to see who wins those spots. Defensive line, or I should say interior defensive line, couple of them. To me, Kenny Clark, just what does he look like? Kind of bouncing back from what was a tougher season for Kenny, and not a terrible season. I still think he was instrumental in that defense being a top 10 defense this past year, but nowhere near the Kenny that we're used to. And that's always tough, is when you see a player who's been so freaking consistent throughout the course of his career, just not have that same sort of ability that we're used to. Can he bounce back and still have a really good season this upcoming year? Or is it just we've seen Kenny play his best ball and it's behind him? and this is just going to be the new Kenny. That's massively intriguing to me. And then Warren Brinson's the other one. Talked about him quite a bit in the deep dive. Just really impressed with the tape. Really think that he can come in and contribute right away. And I just want to see what that looks like. I know that Jeff Hafley the other day was very bullish on his defensive tackles, the 4 guys that were already there: Carl Brooks, Colby Wooden, Devontae Wyatt, Kenny Clark. And to some extent, I understand it. At the same time, as Justice and I have talked about, just feels a little thin. And I do think you're going to need somebody like Brinson to really step up and be another body, especially if there is any injuries in that room. So to me, Kenny Clark, Warren Brinson, the 2 interior defensive linemen, I'm going to be keeping an extra close eye on. Edge rusher, we could go in a few different directions. The real answer is LVN. You could really make an argument for Baron Sorrell and Colin Oliver as rookies and what they can bring to the table. And certainly what Colin Oliver brings is very intriguing because it's so much different than anything they've had on the roster. And then Brenton Cox is, I think, a player that really started to make a name for himself at the end of last year. Is there another step there for Brenton Cox, or does he just kind of peak out as a number 4, number 5 defensive end? Either way, that's intriguing to me. Even Enagbare is another player who I've talked about that I think he's going to have to earn his way onto the roster this year. I don't think anything's going to be handed to him, but there's no question here. This is all about LVN. For LVN, top 15 pick, there's pressure, there's expectations that come along with that. And the Packers, despite getting a 4th and 5th round pick, did not address this defensive end position in a significant way. And it very clearly feels like, while DeMarcus Covington is a piece of this and what he can get out of this defensive line, they are still in the firm belief that LVN is going to be a big-time player for this defense. If that's going to be the case, it'd be nice to see that happen sooner rather than later. All the talent's there, all the effort's there. He's never going to be the bendiest guy, but if he can start to put together a little bit of a pass rush plan, man, does it change the dynamic. If he can go to like 8 sacks and maybe 40, 50 pressures, that's going to add a lot to this team. So there's no question to me, LVN is a huge sort of shatter point player on the season. What I mean by that is a player that what he becomes or doesn't become is going to have a massive ripple effect on what Green Bay can be this season. I think he's right up there, because if he all of a sudden comes out and is really great and rushes the passer at a level that we have not seen from him and becomes a legitimate big time player at defensive end, holy crap, does that raise the ceiling for Green Bay. And on the flip side, if he's just a dude, number 4, number 3, maybe at best, rotational defensive end who ends the season with 4 sacks and, 18 pressures, it's not great. It's going to limit the ceiling of this team, specifically defensively. So I think he's a big-time player and what his outcome is. I'm going to be keeping an extra close eye on him as well. Linebacker, nothing super crazy here, but I am more intrigued now with Edgerrin Cooper, now that they said he's up to 240 pounds, just to kind of see what that looks like. And then the other one is Tyron Hopper. This is not a 5th, 6th, 7th round pick, undrafted free agent that it's like, all right, they brought this guy in, let's see what he can do. This is a top 100 pick. This was a 3rd round pick a season ago. Somebody they clearly liked a lot coming out of the draft and felt could make an impact on the team. And he did not at all in year 1. A little bit on teams, that was about it. Can he become somebody that is really truly competing with Isaiah McDuffie for that number 3 linebacker spot? I would love to see that. I do think there's talent there, but it wasn't all put together a season ago. If that looks better this year, then maybe he gets a little bit more of an opportunity. But I do think there's some talent there. I think it was probably a little bit overdrafted in the round, in the 3rd round last year, but I would just like to see him take that step, become a little bit more of a playmaker, and see if he can get some snaps on defense and maybe some specific personnel packages and some just positional groupings. That I would like to see from him, but he's going to have to take a step and really show that he's there as an off-ball linebacker that can come in and actually contribute. But he's going to be one that I think will help determine the depth of that position, but also if you've maybe got somebody that's a little bit more athletic and maybe a little bit better than Isaiah McDuffie as that number 3 linebacker. Corner, Jair Alexander, we know the story. We don't need to go into it anymore, but this offseason, there's few players that are worth more keeping an eye on just with whatever happens to him than Jair Alexander. But to me, it's Nate Hobbs coming in as a pretty significant free agent signing. They're going to try him outside. How does he look outside? What does he look like inside? What can he bring to this team? Did Green Bay find another gem, a diamond in the rough, or is he just kind of as advertised, or is he a little bit worse than advertised? I think he is going to have a major say on just how good this secondary can be, whether Jair is back or not. They're expecting a big-time performance from Nate Hobbs after that contract. Can he give it to them? That remains to be seen, but that's why he's such an intriguing player to watch this offseason. And last but not least, from a defensive standpoint, Javon Bullard. I am still very bullish on Javon Bullard and what he can become, whether it's at safety or at nickel. I still believe he's more of a safety than a nickel, but his playing time is going to come from nickel. There's not a ton of playing time out there at safety. I want to see if they specialize him more. Do they just have him focus on nickel? I'm assuming they're probably going to cross-train him. Was that too much on his plate a season ago as a rookie? I'm excited to see how he comes back in year two. This is a player that is consistently hungry, wants to be really, really good, is really talented, and I do think he takes a jump in year two. I really do. But how they utilize him and how he comes into camp and really competes, I think is going to go a long way in just how much playing time he gets, because there's a world in which he plays a ton in the slot. There's a world in which if he looks awesome, he could maybe get into a competition with Evan Williams a little bit at safety for some package plays as well. There's a lot on the table there for Bullard, but he's going to have to put it together and really just have a little bit of a better showing in 2025 than what he had in 2024. On special teams, it's all about kick returner, punt returner. We know the kicker, we know the long snapper, we know the punter, but I want to see who wins the kick returner and punt returner jobs, and I think there's a plethora of options that are out there. Whether it's McCole Hardman, we heard that Keyshawn Nixon's still in the mix. I think Marshawn Lloyd can return kicks. I think there's a lot of intriguing options at kick returner and punt returner. I want to see how that plays out. Then from a coaching standpoint, DeMarcus Covington on defense, Sean Mannion on offense. What can Sean Mannion do with Jordan Love? And what can DeMarcus Covington do with those pass rushers to help unlock them? A lot of talent there, not a lot of productivity, at least not as much as you would have liked in 2024. So the players / coaches that I'm keeping an eye on this offseason, Jordan Love at quarterback, Marshawn Lloyd at running back, the entire wide receiver room, Luke Musgrave at tight end, left tackle, right guard, basically, along the offensive line, Kenny Clark and Warren Brinson along the defensive line, Baron Sorrell, Colin Oliver, Brenton Cox, but primarily LVN at edge, Edgerrin Cooper and Tyron Hopper at linebacker, Jair Alexander, Nate Hobbs at corner, Javon Bullard at safety, and then kick returner, punt returner, as well as DeMarcus Covington and Sean Mannion as coaches. If I had to narrow it to three most intriguing players to keep an eye on this offseason: number one, Jordan Love; number two, LVN; number three, Matthew Golden. Those are the three I'll be keeping an extra eye on this offseason, because I think those three are big time Shatterpoint players just to try to set the ceiling and the floor for this Packers team in 2025. That's going to do it for me today. Thank you so much for joining me. I always appreciate it. I'll be right back here tomorrow breaking down the Packers schedule. And as mentioned, we'll go live at 8 p.m. Central Time on Wednesday, plus 7 o'clock p.m. Central over on Bleacher Report. Shout out to our All-Pro and Hall of Fame members: Most Hated Minnesotan, PJ Wynn, John Wild, Brandon Paletta, Boom Handle, Donna Lee, Lori Lord, Baby QB, David McCluskey, Donald Decker, Alex Wong, Peter Ritaka, Jay Zimmerman, B. Brown, Puerto Rican Packer, Dan Gessford, Dylan Patscott, SoCal Pack, Chris Rager, Izzy Roberts, Ian Ewing, Jake Koner, Carlo Delgado, Willie Winkle, Single, Jen Wright, Ian Hewell, and Matt Geiger. I'll see you guys tomorrow, but until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.